My name is Amy Carpenter, and I am the Communications Associate with the Kentucky Resources Council. For those of you who are familiar with us, thank you so much for joining. For those of you who are new or just now hearing about KRC, we are Kentucky's 501c3 nonprofit organization providing free legal assistance statewide for environmental issues. We are so happy to continue our educational workshops that we do in the summer. This session is gathering data on environmental concerns, and we'll be hearing from two wonderful speakers, Larry Taylor and Dr. Lauren Heberly. We know that everyone here cares really deeply about the places that they're living, and it's people like you who are making sure our towns, our regions, our areas are held accountable for any sort of pollution or proposed pollution. But when we see a problem in the places we live, it can be really hard to get people to come along with us and make the changes that we know need to happen without the data. That's why we're excited about this session. So our first speaker today is Larry Taylor. Larry is the Executive Advisor for the Energy and Environment Cabinet's Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs. He's previously worked for the Department of Environmental Protection and served in several roles for the department, including Human Health and Ecological Risk Assessor. He is the Director of the Division of Compliance Assistant and as a Science and Policy Advisor to the Commissioner and the department. Larry is also serving as the Toxic Release Inventory Coordinator, and that's what he will be speaking with us today about. Dr. Lauren Heberly is the Director of the Center for Environmental Policy and Management and Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Louisville. She is the lead investigator for the Community Engagement Core of the University of Louisville Superfund Research Center. And today, Dr. Heberly will discuss the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool created under the Biden administration. So this is a fairly new tool that she'll go over with us today. And we're so happy you're here. But with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, Larry.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and put my presentation up. All right, well, so my name is Larry Taylor, and as my introduction said, I'm in our Office of Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of clarify is that I had said that I was the Director of the Division of Compliance Assistance. I may have accidentally said he is, but I was in Division of Compliance Assistance in our Commissioner's Office, and through those roles, I've had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of the cross-program issues of our department. And last fall, I had the opportunity to move over to our Secretary's office to work on legislative and intergovernmental affairs, which is something that I've really enjoyed over the years, and now do that full time. So our topic for today, we're going to look at one tool in particular that may be very helpful for communities to understand what is in their community and learn a little bit more about those facilities and how they manage their materials. I looked at our topic, gathering data on environmental concerns, and contemplated quite a few different tools. One in particular that I was leaning towards was the EJ Screen, which Lauren Heberly is going to talk about its companion, the Climate and Environmental Justice Screening Tool. Those two work together, and TRI that we're going to talk about is a part of that EJ Screen module, and it incorporates a lot of different map-based databases. But I thought I would focus on the TRI database because it's raw data. It's the actual data that facilities collect and report to EPA and their corresponding states about how they deal with their waste materials. So I thought it would be very helpful to highlight this in particular because it gives you actual data to be able to learn a little bit more about how those facilities are doing that. It's a robust environmental data tool, and I think that you'll, after our session today, will find that to be very helpful. I've been the TRI coordinator since about 2005, 2006. And TRI is not perfect because it is self-reported by facilities, but it is a comprehensive inventory and it has been refined over the years. And we'll talk a little bit about some of its pros and its cons so that you can learn a little bit more about that. Toxic release inventory was passed by Congress after the 1984 Union Carbide accident in Bhopal, India. And there was a smaller release in 1985, a year later, in Institute, West Virginia, in another Union Carbide facility. And I think that got the federal government's attention and EPA's attention as they realized that communities were not aware of what was going on in their facility. So TRI is one part of what's called the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act, EPCRA. And one part of it is reporting by facilities. Another part is emergency planning. So our state's in Division of Emergency Management through the Kentucky Emergency Response Commission, which I happen to also be a commissioner on that commission. And so they oversee emergency planning. Any facility that has an extremely hazardous substance has to report how much they have on at any one time on their facility, so that if a firefighter or police had to attend an emergency there, they would know where those materials are stored, and they would also know a little bit more about what the potential health effects are and its impact zone and those types of things. So with the TRI part of that, it requires every facility that meets certain criteria to report to EPA and their state if they meet 3 different thresholds. And they can file either a Form R, which is their typical form, or if the actual amount that is going, that could potentially impact the environment, that's going out of the facility as a release, if it's below a certain threshold, then it's a Form A, which is a shorter form because their releases are much less. So the reporting thresholds, they have to have at least 10 full-time employee equivalents. They have to fit into a certain national NAICS code. I knew I should have written that down. Certain North American industry classification systems. And so this industry code targets those that are most likely to have to be dealing with hazardous substances and toxic chemicals. They have to have they either manufacture, process, or otherwise use a chemical over a threshold, and that threshold is 25,000 pounds of manufacture or processing materials, or otherwise using over 10,000 pounds. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these thresholds in a second. And then the other category, or the other threshold, is that they need to identify and report releases to the environment, which would be to land, air, surface water, groundwater, and how they treat those materials, how they recycle it, or in some cases, maybe energy recovery if they have ways that they can do that. So looking at those NAICS codes, North American Industry Classification System, there are 409 different 6-digit industry codes that are included in the TRI reporting requirement. And those different industries are extraction, whether it be metals or coal or those types of things, electrical generation, most manufacturing, which is probably the largest subcategory of the NAICS codes. So that would be any food manufacturing, beverage manufacturing, textiles, housing, bulk terminals, research and development, publishing, any solid waste collection or treatment systems, and anyone that does material recovery like recycling or treatment of toxic chemicals. And so, as I had stated, the list is selected based on those facilities that are most likely to have potential to manage toxic substances. So there are 775 different chemicals that are part of this. So there's a list, the EPCRA list or the TRI list, of if you manufacture, process, or otherwise use one of those 775 chemicals, or 33 chemical categories like PFAS or dioxins, those types of things, then you meet the manufacture, process, or otherwise use for this, and you're in that industry code and you have over 10 employees, then you have to report to TRI for that chemical. The EPA does update that list periodically, and by adding chemicals as they become aware of that, or delete chemicals if those are no longer being manufactured, processed, or used in the United States. And for some chemicals, such as that are persistent, bioaccumulative, or toxic, such as dioxins, lead, mercury, PAHs, pesticides, and PCBs, those chemicals have a lower threshold. They're not 25,000 pounds or 10,000 pounds. They may be as low as 1 pound or 10 pounds, or even lower for dioxins. So some of the pros and cons of TRI reporting as a community tool. One of the benefits of TRI reporting is that it's made publicly available. It's available on a website. It's available to anybody, and it's pretty robust in being able to look at specific information. And we're going to go through and demonstrate that and try it out a little bit so that you can see how to navigate that website. And it's information on facilities that are more likely to be managing chemicals of concern. So obviously the flip side of that is if the chemical is not if the industry is not, or the facility is not in an industry that's not on those 709 different industry codes, then they're not required to report. If the chemical is less than 25,000 pounds that they manufacture, process, or otherwise use, they may use that or have that at the facility. But if it's a minor contributor to their industrial activity, then it won't show up on the TRI inventory. And data has been refined over the years, but sometimes they do have the option of reporting ranges in some cases. So they may, if they don't know a definite number of how much they manufacture, process, or otherwise use, they can report a range of different categories, A, B, C, or D, such as 1 to 100 pounds, 101 to 1,000 pounds, or things like that. The other thing, and this is something that I have to help some facilities, is that they often will base those numbers that they're reporting, they'll base it on best professional judgment or process knowledge or a mass balance. An example I can give is that there was a metal cutting facility that made dishwashers, I think, in Kentucky this year, and they used stainless steel. And so they wanted to report, how much of different chemicals that they manufacture, or in their case, they have stainless steel sheets that they process. They cut them, stamp them out, and make them into dishwashers. But they do have some dust or other waste that is recycled. And so they approached their supplier for that stainless steel and said they needed to know how much nickel or how much chromium was in that stainless steel. And that manufacturer could give them, their source of stainless steel could give them a general range. It might have from, 5 parts per million up to 25 parts per million of nickel. So they're going to base and they did base their reporting on, it could be as high as 25 parts per million in that, or 25%, I think it was, in that particular steel, but it may be as low as 5. So they err on the side of caution, but that does affect the reporting if they say that 10% or 5% is in their steel and maybe as low as 1. So it may, in some cases, overestimate how much could be managed, but they did their reporting based on the higher amount. And just because their supplier had that range, they had to pick a larger number. So they use their best judgment of what they can report on that. Just to summarize some of the submissions from 2020. So the way that TRI works is that the reporting is due on July 1st for the previous calendar year. So that means that July 1st of 2022, just a couple weeks ago, though all these facilities had to report on their waste management activities for 2021, calendar year 2021, January 1st to December 31st of last year. So EPA has not finished processing that data. So all we have available right now is the latest is 2020. So In 2020, which was the reports that were due last July 1st of 2021, there were 411 facilities in Kentucky that reported to TRI. There were 1,804 different forms that were submitted, because obviously a facility may have multiple forms, multiple chemicals that they manage throughout the year. And the total amount, these are in pounds, of materials that were managed was 727 million pounds of chemicals. And so management is just the fact that that those chemicals were managed in their processes, and those do not necessarily mean, and they do not mean, that those are released to the environment. They may have had, for the example of steel, they may have taken that steel, the part that was not made into a dishwasher, and they may have sent it off to another steel facility to recycle it. So 727 million chemicals were managed during 2020, and of that, 48 million would be constituted as releases. And we'll talk a little bit more about what a release is in another slide further on. So one thing that EPA does every year, and I have a link down below to our TRI webpage within Kentucky, EPA for years has done what they call a national analysis. They take all that data and they look at trends, and they produce a document every year. And probably about 2010, 2011, we started talking about that, it's important for us to have a Kentucky specific analysis, to look at it from the different perspectives of community members within Kentucky, and be able to look at those trends in reporting and look at Kentucky specific issues that we felt were important, and identify those facilities and recognize facilities that put some effort into pollution prevention and reducing their releases and the amounts that they manage. And then also to provide clear metrics for us within the agency, as well as the industry and the media and the public, on what is going on in Kentucky. And Kentucky is not like other states, so we like to be able to highlight those issues that are important to us. So I'm going to drag a page over here for you to be able to see. This is what our Kentucky TRI webpage is, and I'm going to send this link, as well as any other links, to Amy as a Word document so she can send that out to everybody. So it gives you an introduction to TRI and has a few links to EPA resources, and then we have these TRI annual reports. It's a 2-page document that we produce every year, and it just gives a summary that 94% of chemicals that are managed by facilities in Kentucky during that year were either recycled, treated, or recovered for energy, rather than being released to the air or land or water. 47% of materials that are managed in Kentucky went to recycling, 37% went to treatment, 6% were disposal or release, and then 9% went to energy recovery. We also report on a 5-year trend of releases, and gladly we see that these trends do go down. Some of that is due to facility retirements or changes in their processes to reduce how much is going into the environment. And then we also highlight what the top chemicals are, nitrates. Sometimes those are byproducts of pollution prevention activities. Nitrates may be associated with scrubbers to remove from power plants and other things that, and also it is some of our metal processing facilities, like stainless steel manufacture, nitrates as a water release are in their KPDS outfalls. And then of the total amounts that are released to the environment, 45% were air releases, 38% were land disposal, either landfill or an on-site or off-site landfill, and then 17% of releases went to surface waters. We also highlight which of the top pounds, so North American stainless, you can see that correlates with the nitrates. We talked about how metal processing or metal manufacture, and then our power plants tend to have higher sulfuric acid mists and hydrochloric acid mists, just based on the sheer amount of activity that they have. And then the counties Carroll County, because they have both chemical manufacturing and stainless steel manufacturer and power plants. They tend to be high. Jefferson County, as you can see, is the #2 in 2020. We're going to look at this chart in a few seconds here, and just looking at the long-term trends from the beginning of TRI in 1988 until present. And then because Kentucky had and has had a lot of power plants, we focus in on electrical utilities and look at air emissions and the trends over 5 years, going from 2015, we had 30 million pounds of air emissions, which were sulfuric acid mist and hydrochloric acid mist primarily. And in 2019, 15 million. So it halved in a 5-year period. So that just kind of gives, we provide that because we think it's important to provide that information to the public, as well as to provide some accountability to those facilities of what is going on in Kentucky. Let's see if I can go. Okay, let's go back here. All right, so this gives you a larger view of that chart, and it shows that from 1988 facilities and 1988 chemicals. So after 1988, I think it was 2001, is when power plants were added in to TRI reporting. So this is those chemicals and facilities that were required to report starting in 1988 to present. So 1988 through 2019. It shows you the trends that, the total on-site releases to air, total air emissions, total on-site disposal or other releases, and then total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. The dark blue, this chart doesn't show it, but this is total on and off-site releases. So over about 63, 64 million pounds in 1988, and then dropped down to total releases were under 20 million pounds. So the TRI reporting is important because it provides accountability and it daylights those reporting requirements. This shows the breakdown of waste management practices for 2019 data. 47% was recycled and 37% was treated, and then 6% were actual disposals or releases. And then those trends, that was in that chart as well. So the tools that EPA has provided, pull over EPA's webpage. This is TRI's data and tools webpage. And they have, I think, 19 different tools on this webpage. And they do different things. National analysis and the state and facility fact sheets, those give you a general overview. That some of the tools will allow you to download the form specifically and get facility-specific data. Others will allow for search analysis, like the EnviroFacts or TRI Explorer, which is my personal favorite. And I'm going to demonstrate that one for you. And then the pollution prevention and enforcement activities. It has links to ECHO, which is a federal database of enforcement activities. And then it has a pollution prevention tool that is also helpful to see what is being done for that. So I'll show you here, we've got 19 different ones. And we're going to go to, and you can see that you can click on the graphics and learn a little bit about specific facilities. But let's look at the TRI Explorer, because that, I think, gives us the greatest amount of capability. So first of all, there are 4 tabs along the top. You can click on fact sheets, and you can click on specific states, zip codes. You can enter a zip code and hit submit, and it will give you a fact sheet for that particular location. There's also the release reporting tab, which is the one I think would be most of interest to most people. And there's a waste transfers report that allows you to see how waste is being transferred from one place to another, if that particular facility is sending waste off to either a publicly owned treatment works, wastewater treatment plant, or a landfill, or a facility that does treatments. There's also a waste quantities report that allows you to look at larger quantities of how much is being handled by that facility. So looking at the release reports, you can look at it by chemical and search by year. You can select a specific state or a EPA region or a zip code. So if you live in a particular zip code, you could enter your zip code here, typing that in, and you would be able to identify what facilities are in that zip code or nearby to look at release in that facilities or that location. You can also select specific chemicals. You can look at the core chemical list from 1988, or you can look at chemical groups like HAPs. I'm going to reset this so that I can go back to the, you can select a specific state or a county within that state. You can also, instead of looking at chemicals, so let's, for example, let's say we want to see what chemicals were released in Kentucky in 2020. So if I hit generate report, then it gives us a list alphabetically. It's sortable, so you can see here it's sort down or sort up. So we're going to sort down, and we can see that in 2020, the highest amount that was managed or released into the environment was nitrate, which we saw on our fact sheet. So it shows each one of those. You can click on the individual chemical, and it will give you those chemicals within Kentucky, or chemicals, those facilities within Kentucky that managed or released that particular chemical. We can go back to here. You can also look up specific facilities. So if we want, instead of looking at chemicals within a location, we can search by facilities within a location. So let's say we wanted to look at Kentucky, and maybe we want to go a little deeper and we want to look at specific counties. So we can look at Carroll County, which we saw was one of the higher facility or higher places in Kentucky, and we want to look at all chemicals, all industries. You can narrow that down to specific industries if you wanted to know about waste management facilities, if you want to look about metals, manufacturing, whatever it may be. You can select the specific facilities. You can also narrow it down by chemicals if you want a specific chemical. But we're going to look at Carroll County 2020, generate the report. And now we have a different view than what we saw before, and it shows each individual facility alphabetically in Carroll County. So we can sort that down. North American Stainless, so we can see all of the chemicals that they reported for 2020. Obviously, if you clicked on each of those, you can drill down further. So there's a lot of capabilities that this tool provides. Kentucky Utilities Gent facility, the Dow silicones, you can see they had chloromethane, copper, dimethyl sulfate, dioxins, HCl, lead. So that's the facility view. You can also look at long-term trends. So within Kentucky, we could select Kentucky and look at those trends over time for the chemicals from 1988. We could look at 2020 was the last group that were updated. So now that includes PFAS and other chemicals and other industries. So if we were to want to look at the 2020 core chemicals, looking at their trends, that's the downside of having live views. Sometimes it doesn't work right away. So I apologize for that. We'll go, oh, there it is. So for 2020, because since there's only 2020 data, that's the only thing that's going to show here. So let's go back here to another year, looking at the 2011 core chemicals, which were the last big one, big update. So now for 2011 through 2020, you can see now, you can look at trends in fugitive air emissions, went from, in 2011, from 5.4 million, and in 2020, went down to 2.9. So you can see that over time, fugitive air emissions have decreased within Kentucky, and we can do the same thing based on individual counties. You can do it on you may be able to do a zip code. I'm not sure about a zip code. Let's see. Yeah, we can enter a zip code as well. So that's why I highlight this as one of my favorites, because it just has so many capabilities and allows you to really drill down and do some some real detailed data drill downs to identify what the trends are, what is in a location, what is in a neighborhood, what is close to your home, those types of things. You can also look at geographic issues. You can look at industry issues. So that's why I feel that the TRI Explorer is probably one of the best ones out there when it comes to tools that are available to allow you to search for so many different things. But there's Toxics Tracker, there's the pollution prevention tool. So many other things are on this link that I'm going to send to Amy. And I think that you'll find that these tools will give you plenty to work with to learn about what's going on in a particular location. So we've already gone through and talked about how to navigate the TRI Explorer, and that link will be in this package that I send to Amy as well. So another tool that's on there is called the pollution prevention tool, and EPA put this out because it allows facilities to highlight some of the good things they're doing to reduce their impacts. Some facilities are responsible enough that when they see that their TRI reports are significant numbers, several of them will put into practice at their facility activities that reduce the amount of pollution that's going into the environment, or they find ways to use a less toxic chemical, or to find a way to reduce their impact on the environment, reduce the amount of waste. And many of them have found that they can use for energy recovery. They can recycle. If they put into new equipment, they found that they produce less waste, and that affects their bottom line as well. So the pollution prevention tool allows these facilities to identify practices. And one of the nice things I like about this is that they report by their industry code. And so other industries, and I've worked with the Pollution Prevention Center at the University of Louisville, and done similar presentations for facilities to help them navigate this tool, to be able to find that other facilities in the United States that are in their same industry sector, what they are doing to reduce pollution. And so here's an example for Kentucky. This was 2020. Actually, this graphic here may have actually been nationwide, but out of the whole nation, 1,188 facilities reported different practices of things they're doing. So, for example, some had reduced pollution through good operating practices. Some implemented spill and leak prevention programs. Some modified their raw materials. And so this allows them to highlight some of the things they're doing, and it helps other facilities that are in their same industry sector to see what they can do to do similar things that some of their industry leaders are doing to reduce pollution. So there's my contact information. That will provide you an opportunity to get in touch with me if you have any follow-up questions. And then I will send links to all of these things that were highlighted on the presentation so that you can be able to access them as well.